And after the prayers, we'll do a little bit of meditation to get into as positive a state of mind as possible for being here.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow, who with pure bodies form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow, who with the supreme science, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field, endow with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So let's sit quietly for a few minutes to settle our minds down. You may have already done a lot of things this morning and had conversations, so don't let those continue running through your mind, but put them aside for now. You can always pick them up again later, but really try to keep your mind here in the present place, present moment, so that you can get the most out of this class. So do whatever you can to settle down your mind, like watching the breath coming in and going out. That's a good way to bring the mind to the present moment. So there's a lot of talk about uniting method and wisdom. And in the sutra tradition, which the Lamrim is part of, that means uniting compassion, bodhicitta, activities for the benefit of sentient beings, and wisdom, the understanding of the true nature of things. So right now we are focusing on that, learning about the perfection of wisdom. And that can be really engrossing. There's a lot of terminology, a lot of concepts that are hard to understand, so we can get really caught up in trying to figure out what it all means. And that's important to do, but it's also important to make sure that we maintain the other side of the path, the method side of the path, the compassion and love and bodhicitta as much as possible. So those two, method and wisdom, compassion and wisdom, ideally need to be balanced. We need to ensure that we have both of those in our mind and in our attitude as we go about our practice, our study, and everything we do. So, to get a sense of compassion, bring to mind an instance where you observed someone else being compassionate. You might have been the recipient of that. Someone just showing you a lot of compassion, maybe when you were having difficulties and someone was there to help you and support you with a compassionate attitude. Or you could think of observing someone being compassionate to somebody else, just observing that or hearing about that. So bring to mind some instance where somebody showed compassion. Try to recall that as clearly as possible. So observing another person acting in a compassionate way is really helpful for us to get in touch with compassion in ourselves, like our mirror neurons working, and we can also feel compassion along with the other person. So compassion is something incredibly precious and beautiful. It's a beautiful, positive, virtuous state of mind. And we also have it and act in accordance with it. We do things that are compassionate, probably every day, many times a day. But it doesn't hurt to work on increasing our compassion. We want to nourish that state of mind and increase it so we can feel it for more and more people and more often, until eventually it becomes great compassion. Great compassion is feeling compassion for all living beings without exception, and not just wishing them to be free of suffering, but feeling responsible, like taking on the responsibility. I want to do that. I want to do whatever it takes in order to help all living beings be free of suffering. Although we can't actually remove their suffering, we can't take away their suffering and make them free of suffering, but we can still work to help them, to guide them, so that they do what it takes to be free of suffering. So see if you can feel how wonderful it would be to have that state of mind of great compassion and have the aspiration to attain it one day. And great compassion is one of the main causes for Bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha, in order to help all living beings be free of suffering, help them all find happiness up to the highest happiness of enlightenment. So again, feel the aspiration to one day have natural, spontaneous, uncontrived bodhicitta as your reason, your motivation for everything you do in your life. And right now we can generate contrived forms of compassion, love, and bodhicitta. We can think in certain ways to generate those thoughts. These are still contrived, not natural and spontaneous, but it's still important to do. And this is how we one day eventually achieve the uncontrived forms of these states of mind. So do that now as your reason, your motivation for listening to these teachings on wisdom, which is another essential component of the path to enlightenment. So I think that you're listening to, learning about this topic so that eventually you become a Buddha, fully enlightened Buddha, and able to benefit all sentient beings. So last time we got up to page 347. And this is a section called The Reason You Need to Seek the View That Realizes Selflessness if you wish to eliminate that ignorance. So he's just pointing out why it's necessary to gain the realization of selflessness or emptiness if we want to get rid of ignorance. So this is all leading up to the actual methods, which we'll probably start looking at today. Just finish this section. So we're on the second main paragraph on 347 that starts with the two apprehensions of a self mainly operate while something, a person or a phenomenon, is being observed. Therefore, you must determine that the very bases for misapprehension do not exist in the way they are apprehended. Otherwise, it would be like searching for a thief in a meadow after he has fled to the forest. So I was a little baffled by what this is about, and I couldn't find any more information about it. But my guess is what he's saying is that, okay, so he said there's two kinds of ignorance. This is ignorance that grasps at inherent existence, the root ignorance, the main ignorance, and that has two forms. There's grasping at persons as inherently existing and grasping at phenomena other than persons as inherently existing. So there's those two kinds of grasping at inherent existence. And it seems like he's saying that those operate while we are observing some object. It could be our own eye, or it could be some other person, or it could be something inanimate, like a computer, car, and so on. So while we're observing, looking at or thinking about some object, that's when these types of ignorance can occur. And so I think what he's saying is what we need to do in order to realize selflessness or emptiness is to recognize that these objects don't exist the way they are apprehended by ignorance. They appear inherently existing. They always appear to be inherently existing. And we sometimes, not always, but sometimes our mind will kind of grasp at that appearance, buy into it, assent to it, believe in it. Not always, but sometimes we have that kind of mind, that conceptual mind that really believes that object to exist that way. So that's when ignorance is operating, is functioning, is doing its thing. And so this is what we need to understand, and not look somewhere else for the meaning of emptiness. Not think that we can learn about emptiness in some other way. I don't know what way that might be, but looking elsewhere, outside of our own mind, outside of our own experience, when we are grasping at some object as inherently existing. I think that's what he's saying. And that's what is often said, that, it's right here in our mind and our everyday experience that we find ignorance and not somewhere else. And he says, consequently, since you remove the mistake by meditating on the determined meaning, such an emptiness is the supreme meaning of suchness. If you determine something apart from the meaning of suchness that eliminates that mistake, then the only thing that will cease is something imputed by your own assertions. So if we don't, recognize how our mind grasps at inherent existence and work on that and think that emptiness means something else apart from that, then, this is just something conceptually imputed, conceptually made up, which I guess could happen. People might just really get the wrong understanding of what emptiness means and go with that and think they understand emptiness, but actually they got it all wrong. So it's really important to get it right. Therefore, remember that this deviates from the meaning of the scriptures. That being so, the ignorance that apprehends the elaborations of persons, such as men and women, and of phenomena, such as forms and feelings, to be truly existent, is stopped by gaining the view that realizes their emptiness or selflessness and meditating on it. Once that ignorance has stopped, you stop discursive thought. The term here is actually namtok, the famous namtok. We all know very well, don't we? Good friend. Just sometimes it's translated as superstition, but it's just that blah, blah, blah that goes on in our mind all the time and isn't helpful and often harmful. Okay, so when we stop ignorance, then we stop that kind of blah, 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 incorrect thinking, which is the improper mental attention that superimposes qualities such as attractiveness and repulsiveness while observing the object of the apprehension of true existence. So that's what we looked at last week, how afflictions arise. We first see some object and maybe it looks attractive. Well, no, sorry. The first thing is we see it as inherently existing, truly existing. Then on top of that, this namtok, superstitious thought, starts elaborating on it, exaggerating its attractiveness, making it more wonderful than it really is. Or if it's something we don't like, find unattractive, then namtok elaborates, exaggerates negative things, kind of adding more negative things than are already there. And this keeps happening until we eventually have either strong attachment, wanting that object, or strong aversion, wanting to get away from that one, or harm it, or destroy it, or whatever. So this is how afflictions arise. So he says, once that has stopped, once we've stopped this namtok, this improper mental attention, then the other mental afflictions that have the view of the transitory collection as their root, such as attachment, also stop. Or we stop those painful, disturbing afflictions. And once they have stopped, karma, motivated by them, stops. Once that has stopped, rebirth in cyclic existence, propelled by karma without control, stops. And liberation is thereby achieved. It sounds so easy, doesn't it? Just do. But yeah, not quite that easy. Takes time to do all these things. But anyway, he's just pointing out how, this process, looking at how our mind grasps at things as inherently existing and then realizing that's incorrect, this will eventually lead to liberation. With this in mind, generate strong certainty and then decisively seek the view of suchness. The root text on wisdom, that's Nagarjuna's text, which is also sometimes called Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. That's kind of the main text explaining emptiness according to Prasangika. There is freedom when karma and afflictions are spent. Karma and afflictions arise from thoughts. And again, this is namtok, because not all thoughts are negative. Right? We have to use thought in order to understand emptiness. If we just stop all thoughts, then we won't be able to get an understanding of emptiness. So it's specifically that improper mental attention, or namtok, that is stopped here. And those arise from elaborations. Elaborations are stopped by emptiness, by realizing emptiness. You must understand those stages of entering into and turning away from cyclic existence, and greatly cherish the realization of the meaning of suchness. It's only by understanding suchness, which is another synonym of emptiness and selflessness. There's all these different terms that mean the same thing. However, it will not come through a vague involvement that fails to distinguish well the objects of observation. And the term here that's translated as objects of observation is actually just mik, not mikpa. And so Jeffrey translates it as points. So it could mean the points of this teaching. Anyway, we shouldn't have just a vague understanding. We should have a very clear, precise understanding. Okay, now, how to do it? How to generate the view that realizes selflessness. This has 3 points. The stages of generating the 2 views of selflessness. Second, the actual progressive generation of the 2 views of selflessness. And third, presenting conventional and ultimate truths, the 2 truths. I think this is going to take us to the end of the book. Okay, first, the stages of generating the 2 views of selflessness. As for the stages in which the 2 apprehensions of a self arise, so this is the 2 graspings at inherent existence. So the way they arise is the apprehension of a self of phenomena generates the apprehension of a self of persons. So we looked at that a few weeks ago, like with our own I, our sense of self or I. First, what appears is the aggregates or some part of the aggregate. It doesn't have to be all of it, but just one part, like our body or our mind. And then our mind just habitually, the aggregates appear inherently existing, and our mind just kind of buys into that appearance. So there's self-grasping of phenomena that happens first. Then on the basis of that, there's the sense of I. There's an I, a me, myself that is, there is an I, but it's just imputed, just designated to the aggregates. So that I does exist. But our mind, with ignorance, wrongly thinks that that I isn't merely designated, but is real, inherently existing from its own side. So that is what is grasped at. So we first have grasping at phenomena as inherently existing, or aggregates. Then on top of that, as a result of that, grasping at the self, the I, as inherently existing. So that's the order in which they occur, or they arise. And he says, still, when you engage in the suchness of selflessness, you must first generate the view of the selflessness of persons, and then after that generate the view that realizes the selflessness of phenomena. So the order of dealing with these 2 types of ignorance is that we first have to realize the emptiness of the self, the person, the I, mainly our own I. And then after that, the selflessness of phenomena. So this is something we talked about a few weeks ago. Venerable Pema had asked a question about it. And then from Precious Garland, if persons are not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, and not all of them together, then what else could persons be? Since beings are composites of the 6 elements, they are not real. And in that same way, each element is also a composite, and therefore is not real either. So that kind of shows that we first, examine the person, the self, the I, that is really just designated in relation to the elements of our body, earth, water, fire, wind, space, and consciousness. And, we can't find any kind of real person within them. Then we turn our attention to those elements themselves and examine them. And they're also composites. They're also made up of smaller and smaller and smaller particles. And so we can't find a real element, earth element, water element, and so on. Real meaning inherently existing. So the commentary, he explains lack of inherent existence first in terms of the person and then in terms of the basis it is imputed on, the elements such as earth. Chandrakirti's clear words and Buddha Palita also explain that when entering into suchness, one first enters by way of the selflessness of persons. Shantideva also says that. So it's still a kind of mystery why, as we mentioned, Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom and also Chandrakirti's entering the middle way. Both of those start with selflessness of phenomena. So maybe I'll ask Venerable Children if she's heard anything about that. Or we ask the next Geshe that comes. A Geshe question. It must be done like this because although the selflessness ascertained on the basis of persons and phenomena do not differ in terms of being more subtle or coarse, it is easier to ascertain selflessness on the basis of persons and more difficult to ascertain it on the basis of phenomena, owing to attributes of the bases. I don't know what that means, but anyway. So selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena are equally subtle. There isn't, one is more coarse and the other more subtle, but because of the basis, the attributes of the basis, meaning the basis in terms of selflessness of persons would be the I, the mere I, and the basis for selflessness of phenomena would be like the aggregates or whatever object we are analyzing, the things that make it up. And it was in Jeffrey's text at this point that he mentioned, I think I mentioned it last time, His Holiness saying that it may be because all the Buddhist schools of philosophy agree that a person is imputed on the aggregates, not something real from its own side, but imputed on the aggregates. So maybe because if you're Buddhist in whatever school you're brought up in, then you would have that view of a person being something imputed rather than something real from its own side. But I don't know. It's a topic of debate. But yeah, they do seem to be unanimous, the Tibetans, at least in our tradition, that, we start with looking at our own self, our own I. But that's also just practical as well, because as long as we, as Venerable Deki's BBC yesterday, we have this strong sense of a self, an I, a me, then that leads to so many problems, afflictions, and all kinds of messes in our life. And so working on that is much more practical than analyzing a computer or even analyzing our body. I mean, of course, those are helpful, but the I, such a big part of our life and our problems and our suffering. So yeah, working on that, analyzing that, coming to see how that doesn't exist inherently is very helpful. Then he says, likewise, it is more difficult, for example, to ascertain the selflessness of phenomena on the basis of eyes, ears, and so forth, and easier to ascertain it on the basis of reflected images and the like, which is why these latter are taken as illustrations for determining the selflessness of the former. So now he's comparing with regard to phenomena, something like our eyes and ears and so forth, as compared to a reflection, like a reflection in a mirror. So he's saying it's easier to realize how a reflection in a mirror is, empty of inherent existence, compared to something like eyes and ears. And it's easy to see that a reflection in a mirror just occurs because of causes and conditions. There's the mirror, the glass. I don't know how they make mirrors. It's glass, but there's something on the other side that enables it to reflect. And so you have that phenomena, and then standing in front of it, putting your body or face in front of that mirror. And if there's light, of course, you need light, then these conditions cause the appearance of this reflection, which looks like a real person, yeah? Looks like a real you over there in that mirror, but it's not. So it's easy to understand how that is not inherently independently existing. There's no real I or me in that reflection. So that's easy to understand. But when it comes to something like our eye or ear or nose or our body, any other part of our body, that is more difficult. It seems much more solid and real. So when they do debating and use and syllogisms, you've done some of that with Venerable, and usually you when you present a syllogism, there's an example given, like all phenomena as the subject are empty of inherent existence. That's the the thesis, is that what it's called? Predicate? Because of dependent arising, because they're dependent arising. That's the reason. And then you add an illustration, such as a reflection in a mirror. So that's kind of a full syllogism for proving an emptiness. And so since it's easy to understand how reflections in mirrors lack inherent existence, then that can lead us to understand how something else, like a body, is empty of inherent existence. This is the intended meaning of the King of Concentration's sutra when it says, just as you know the perception of self, apply it to everything mentally. The nature of all phenomena is completely pure like space. All of them are known through one, and all of them are seen through one. This says that once you know well the way the I abides, with regard to which the perception of a self, thinking I, operates, you should then apply its reasoning to all internal phenomena like eyes and ears, and external phenomena like pots, knowing that they are similar to it. Thus, through knowing and seeing the natural disposition of one phenomenon, you are thus able to know and see the natural state of all other phenomena. Yeah, so when it comes to actually developing an understanding of emptiness, they say, use one thing at a time, not all phenomena, but start with one. And it's recommended that we start with our own I. And if we can, gain a correct understanding, correct realization of how our I is empty of inherent existence, then they say it's very easy to turn your mind to some other object, anything else, and understand that that too is empty of inherent existence. So you don't have to go through a really long process with each and every phenomena, but on the basis of realizing it with one, you can easily understand the emptiness of other things. Okay, so that finishes that chapter. Any questions so far before we continue?
It's just a comment, but in the book Pure Visions and Spiritual Realizations about His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I just read it a few months ago. It's an amazing book. But he says that he realized the emptiness of phenomena first, before realizing the emptiness of the I, and that it was easier for him, and it was very powerful actually, because the I didn't have anywhere to hide anymore.
So what did he use for the phenomena in his body?
Aggregates. Yeah.
He realized that first.
Yeah.
Interesting. Where? I haven't seen that book. Do we have that book in our
I don't know where it
library?
is right now. Venerable Children has a copy if you want to ask her. It's sitting on her shelf right now in Prajna Cottage.
Well, I don't have time to read right now, but I'm really interested in it.
But it's like 3/4 in the book, or maybe towards the end, the last third.
Yeah.
At some point he speaks about
I
it.
believe you. Yeah, and is this, who's the author of this book? It's a collection of like anecdotes?
It's two books. There's one that's one of those Tibetan titles, The Sun That Rises in the Potala Palace. I don't know, something like that. And no, it's not an autobiography. Someone collected all the times that His Holiness spoke at throughout the years about different topics, and compiled all of that. And the part is about his realization of emptiness and how he worked through that. And I remember I read it like 3 or 4 times in a row, making sure that I was reading correctly. And he did say that, he realized emptiness of phenomena through the aggregates first.
That's helpful. Yeah, because it does seem to me, anyway, with my limited knowledge, that, it's easier to see. I mean, partly because material things like your body, that's so much easier to see, whereas the mind and, the I is something more subtle, more difficult to see and then be able to analyze.
I know that personally, not that I'm realized, but I've done a lot of mindfulness of the body and this kind of stuff. So for me, that comes way more naturally to look at the aggregates and look at the emptiness of the aggregates. Whereas looking for the emptiness of the I feels very abstract somehow, and I find it very difficult to do. Yeah, but it's just my personal experience, which is very, very, very limited. But
you're kind of going in the direction of His Holiness.
From last week and this week, considering like that point where the I is just appearing, like you're relaxed on a couch, you're reading a book, you know that I'm reading a book, but there's not this grasping. And then the example that was given was someone comes in and insults you, and then suddenly the I puffs up. And just the mechanism by which that happens is just not clear to me. I know I've seen that daily in my experience, how that happens. But I guess to be able to articulate the process or to understand fully how that I starts to where the grasping starts, as opposed to it just being a recognition of,
Yeah, I don't know. I can't really answer that from my experience, but it does happen so quickly. And there probably are things happening in the mind, we have these imprints of ignorance there in the mind. There's zillions of them from all the times we have grasped at an inherently existing I in this lifetime and in our past lives as well. So it's just so habitual, so familiar, that it doesn't take much for those imprints to get triggered, stirred up, and then arise, and that grasping to happen. So I don't know what to say about that. It just to try to be really mindful, super mindful, and try to notice how that arises. Although they do say, because we have to see the object of negation, we have to see the inherently existing I to then use the reasons to refute it. And they say you can imagine, you can try to remember experiences where your I came up strongly, like you're falsely accused of something you didn't do, or that's the one they usually mention. So any kind of situation where there's a strong emotion comes up. So it's at those times that the sense of a real, inherently existing I is most clear, most obvious. Because at other times, it's still there. We still see our I as inherently existing, but it isn't as easy to recognize. So I guess if we can just recall incidents where it did come up, but then I think you'd have to be very, very perceptive, very mindful, have really strong mindfulness to be able to look at your mind and recognize, what's actually happening. And in those situations too, your emotions are triggered up. That itself makes it very hard to recognize what's going on, because you're just so caught in the emotion or caught in whatever is triggering that emotion. That's what your focus is on, not looking at your own mind and what is going on. So, yeah, tricky, very difficult. But I guess with more training in mindfulness, more development of mindfulness, watching our mind and what's going on in our mind, then hopefully that does get easier.
The analogy that is often given with refuting the self of persons is the analogy of the chariot. And Venerable Children has pointed this out many times, that although the example you give in an analogy should be easier to understand than what you're trying to exemplify, and yet if it's easier to understand the selflessness of the person, why is the selflessness of a phenomena being used as the example?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Only I see is the similarity, that the imputing on a basis is just being exemplified.
My understanding is that, because a chariot, or in modern terms, a car, we don't have chariots parked out front that we can examine, but cars, we have plenty of those. Yeah, so using an object like that, it's something visible, tangible. So it's much easier to see how it's made up of parts, and you can kind of look at all the parts and not find anything that is the car or the chariot. So that's much easier than something like the I. Yeah. So he's explaining what this is. Chandrakirti's entering the middle way, where he explains that reasoning, and so he explains it first on the basis of a chariot, and then applies it to the I. But I think it's still considered that you want to use it on the I. That's the main thing that we want to target on. He's just using the example of a chariot to explain it. That answering your question?
Well, it kind of leads to supporting the argument that the phenomena being tangible is easier to understand.
Yeah, it seems
so
like
it seems to still come up with that same question.
I mean, I agree. I always had that difficulty when they say, "Oh, it's easier to realize the emptiness of the self." But then when I did ask that question, I asked Khenso Dhamma that question, and he said when it's talking about aggregates, when it's talking about phenomena, it mainly means the aggregates. That's the main thing we want to realize, that these aggregates, which are the basis on which our I is designated, these are empty of experience. I mean, that's really important. More important than cars and chariots and things like that. We have to realize that these aggregates don't exist inherently, because seeing the aggregates as inherently existing is the basis for seeing an inherently existing I. So this is the most important thing. So he says it's more difficult to see emptiness of the aggregates than the I, but His Holiness points experiences. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to bring that in.
Yeah. Because I seem to recall, I've heard His Holiness talk about this incident. I think he was still pretty young. And I think he was reading Buddha Palita's commentary to Nagarjuna. And in the middle of reading, it was something about the I, something about the selflessness of the I. He had this, jolt experience of the I being empty. And he said it was really quite powerful. It was like being hit by lightning. And it really affected him physically as well as mentally. So I kind of thought that was his first experience, but I could be wrong.
So when I see such statements about realizing the selflessness of person first, then you generate the view that realizes selflessness of phenomena. Like how I explain to myself is this person imputed on the aggregates, the self, possibly might be easier than when you talk about your aggregates, especially the mind, because I do not have a direct experience of the nature of the mind. I have clear an awareness, and to be able to realize that, first I have to be able to identify what is the nature of that mind. So that is how I would understand this. I'm still puzzled by why Chandrakirti in the Entry to the Middle Way and Arya-Nagarjuna, versus the difference in order. I think my question was like, is there a reason how these explanations, and I also get that probably the context of the audience, and these texts were not written, they were spoken teachings.
Nagarjuna? Nagarjuna didn't write his texts?
As in, probably it was a teaching that people scribed.
Yeah? Oh,
That would
I
be
never
my.
thought about that.
That would be my kind of my thought, but I could be wrong. Yeah. So that would be how I. Yeah. I'm still interested to understand.
Yeah, there's not a lot known about the history of people like Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti. Very, very little known. So I suppose nobody really knows if he sat down and wrote the text or he taught it and then other people wrote it down. So it just never occurred to me that. But anyway, so it could have been various conditions at the time, society, people's views, what's going on, and so on that affected that.
To me personally, it does seem easier to understand the emptiness of an abstract composite than of things that you see directly, because it's easier to understand that it's imputed.
Yeah, the person, the self, the I is an abstract composite. Okay, so let's continue. We start a new chapter, 23, the selflessness of persons. So the actual progressive generation of the two views of selflessness, this has 2 points, determining the selflessness of persons and determining the selflessness of phenomena. Determining the selflessness of persons has 2 points, identifying persons and determining them to not exist inherently. So identifying persons are persons of the 6 classes, gods and so forth, and cats. Don't forget cats, they are persons too. And persons who are ordinary beings, Aryas, and so forth. And so forth includes Buddhas. Yeah, Buddhas are also persons. Arhats are persons. Yeah, so all beings, whether they're enlightened or ordinary, in all the 6 realms, all are persons. They are also the accumulators of virtuous and non-virtuous karma. The experiencers, well, that doesn't apply to Buddhas. The experiencers of the effects of those, revolvers, revolvers, those who revolve in cyclic existence, cultivators of paths for the sake of liberation, attainers of liberation, and so forth. So there are persons who do all these things, who create karma, experience the results, circle in samsara, and then eventually follow the path that leads out of samsara and attain liberation, enlightenment, and so on. A sutra quoted in works such as the Entering the Middle Way Auto Commentary says, the so-called self is Mara's thought, and you have come to hold this view. The composition of aggregates is empty. There is no sentient being in it. Just as people speak of chariots based on collections of chariot parts, they conventionally say sentient beings based on the aggregates of beings. So this set of verses is, it's found in Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way, and I think other works as well. But there's no mention of what sutra it is and who said these words. But recently, I don't know, any other, Venerable Children found the source of this, and it's in volume 8, Realizing the Profound View, on page 15. So this story actually involved a nun, a bhikshuni, whose name was Vajira. And she was meditating in the forest and had an encounter with Mara. So here's the full story. One afternoon, the Buddha's disciple, Bhikshuni Vajira, was meditating in a grove. Mara, the personification of self-grasping, sought to disturb her meditation by asking a question about an external creator. Recognizing the speaker as the troublemaker Mara, Bhikshuni Vajira replied and spoke these verses. So the way they're translated here, I guess this would be from Tibetan into English. And I think what's in volume 8 is from the Pali Canon, the Samyutta Nikaya. So this is probably translated from the Pali. So it's a somewhat different translation. Saying, why now do you assume a being? Mara, is that your speculative view? This is a heap of sheer formations. Here no being is found. So being, there's a number of terms that are said to be synonymous. Self, I, person, and being. So all of those terms are synonymous in Buddhist philosophy. So it's like saying there is no self. You can't find any self in this heap of formations, the aggregates. And then the chariot comes up. Just as with an assemblage of parts, the word chariot is used, so when the aggregates exist, there is the convention of being, or self, or person, whatever you want to say. So that's that's the origin of the chariot story, and it's helpful. Yeah, you can see how a chariot is just made up of all these different parts, like wheels and I don't know the names, but anyway, different parts put together and made into this thing that people can ride in with a horse pulling it. And so you look at all the parts, you can't find anything that is a chariot among those parts. So chariot is just designated, it's just named, labeled, like a term used to refer to that collection of parts. And so in a similar way, when you have aggregates, our 5 aggregates, physical and mental aggregates, then there is this term, a being, a person, or self, I. So that's how the I exists. So then Lama Tsongkhapa comments on it. The first verse teaches the selflessness of persons, which is that ultimately persons do not exist. Persons do not exist ultimately. So ultimately is another kind of synonym of inherently existing. There's all these different terms, inherently existing, existing from its own side, and so on and so forth. So existing ultimately is another synonym of that, which is confusing in a way, because then they talk about ultimate truth. So when the term ultimate is used in that way, ultimate truth, that is referring to emptiness. Okay, so you have to get that straight. Ultimate truth, that does exist. That's emptiness, the ultimate nature of things. But when it says existing ultimately, that's false. That's referring to inherent existence, a false mode of existence. So that can be really confusing in the beginning. You have to learn those different terms and what they mean. Okay, the first line says that the apprehension of a self of persons is a fiendish mind. That's a cool term, fiendish. It's actually Mara, but that sounds better than demon. I think fiendish, a fiendish mind. The second one says that those who apprehend in this manner are under the power of bad views, wrong views. And the third and fourth say that the aggregates are empty of a self of persons. So within the aggregates, this collection of body and mind, atoms and moments of experience, there's no inherently existing self. The second verse indicates that persons exist conventionally. More specifically, the first and second lines present an analogy, that the chariot, and the last two connect it to the meaning, indicating that persons are merely imputed on the basis of the aggregates. So just as the name chariot or car is imputed to a collection of, the chassis and the wheels and the engine and so on and so on, all these thousands of parts. In the same way, person is just imputed or labeled or designated on, in relation to a set of aggregates. The sutra passage is saying that the collection of aggregates is the basis of imputation of the person. So that's one of these technical terms, basis of imputation. So for something to exist, to actually exist validly, there has to be a basis of imputation. So like in the case of the car, it would be all the parts of the car, a collection of parts of the car. That's the basis of imputation. And then there's the imputed object. What is imputed onto that, which in the case of the car would be just the name car, the term car. So car, the word car is imputed onto this basis of imputation, all the parts of the car. The same with a person. The basis of imputation is this set of aggregates. And then the object imputed onto that would be person, I, John, whatever, yeah, some name, some term, usually a number of terms, right? We have a number of different terms that we could use for a person. But that's the imputed object. Okay, so the collection of aggregates is the basis of imputation of the person, and it is not logical for the basis of imputation to be the imputed phenomenon. Why? Now that's actually not easy to understand. And that's, well, when we get to the actual reasoning, that's one of the things we're going to look at, that the basis of imputation, like the collection of aggregates, is not the imputed phenomenon, the person. So in reality, in our experience, we don't realize that. We see them as the same thing. So I'll read something from Volume 8. Volume 8, and it's kind of, first talking about Chandrakirti's sevenfold reasoning. It's kind of an introduction to that. So after talking about how Chandrakirti's sevenfold reasoning examines the relationship between a designated object, so designated object, she uses the word designated, here it's imputation. So an imputed object or a designated object like a car, and the basis of designation or basis of imputation, the parts of the car or the collection of the parts. So Chandrakirti's sevenfold reasoning examines the relationship between those two things. What is the relationship between the basis of designation or basis of imputation and the imputed object? So I don't think this, I haven't gotten too far in this, I don't think it talks about sevenfold reasoning, but it presents this one reasoning, which is often called the 4-point analysis, but it's not really that different. Chandrakirti just adds more, more points to it, but it's really basically the same as what's presented here, this so-called 4-point analysis. So the main points are looking at, are they one or different, right? Are the basis of imputation and the imputed object, are they one and the same, or are they different? So it's examining those. And then Chandrakirti adds some other things like, I can't remember all of them, but is one the possessor of the other, shape, collection. Anyway, so what I was going to read was, the book says, usually we confound the two, thinking that the basis of designation is the designated object. And on that basis, we think the car has its own intrinsic essence. It exists inherently. And if that were so, the car would have to exist in one of the 7 ways. So this sentence we just read in the book is not so easy to understand. it is not logical for the basis of imputation to be the imputed phenomenon. So he just presents that like, oh, of course, I understand that. But actually it's not so easy to understand. But after reading through this section, hopefully we'll have a better understanding of it. The collection of aggregates must be understood as both the collection of aggregates at a given moment and the collection of aggregates across earlier and later moments. So I guess that means, in one moment, if you isolate one single moment, then at that moment there's a collection of aggregates that exist in that moment. That's one meaning of collection of aggregates. But you can also talk about collection of aggregates over a period of time. There's a collection of aggregates over several moments or hours or days or years. Therefore, it is illogical to posit the continuum of the collection of aggregates as the person. What does the footnote say? This is because one can neither say that it consists in the aggregates at a given point of time, nor at an earlier point, or earlier or later point. What else in the continuum would it be? Where else in the continuum would it be found? So if there's a continuum of collection of aggregates over a period of time, then you couldn't say that is the aggregates at a given point in time, nor earlier or later point. I haven't actually thought about that one, so I can't comment on it. Yeah, maybe I'll come back to that next week. The next sentence says, when the collection is posited as the basis of imputation, the possessor of the collection is also posited as the basis of imputation, and therefore it is unreasonable for both to be the person. I also had some trouble with this sentence because I didn't understand what the possessor of the collection is. Jeffrey said the possessor is the parts. The possessor of the collection is the parts. Possessor of the collection is the parts. So that didn't make sense to me. Yeah, I tried to find more information about these two sentences, but I wasn't able to. So let's put them aside for now and not worry about them. Maybe if we come back to them later, that will make sense. Then entering the middle way says, the sutras say that since it depends on the aggregates, the mere collection of aggregates is not the self. So since the self, a person, a self, depends on the aggregates, then you cannot say that the mere collection of the aggregates is the self. Something different. But this is going to get more clear when we go into the actual reasoning, looking at one and different of the aggregates. Is the person one with the aggregates or different from the aggregates? And the teacher said, the aggregates are the self. If that's why you posit the aggregates as the self, it only refutes a self apart from the aggregates. For other sutras make statements like, form is not the self. Yeah, so I remember this in Chandrakirti's text that the other schools aside from the Prasangika school point to this passage in the sutra where the Buddha said, the aggregates are the self. And so from their point of view, they point to something within the aggregates as being the self, the conventional self, conventional existing self. So Some of the other Buddhist schools, like Vibhashika, they say that the self, the conventionally existing self, is the collection of the aggregates, all the aggregates together. Other schools point to the mental consciousness. They say the mental consciousness is the self, because that is what goes from one life to the next. The body is left behind, everything is left behind. The mental consciousness goes on. And the Chitamatrans, who believe in a foundational consciousness, the mind basis of all, storehouse consciousness, as it's sometimes called, they say that is the self, the conventionally existing self. But the Prasangikas say, no, all of those are wrong. You cannot point to anything in the aggregates, either a single instance or single part of the aggregates or the collection of the aggregates as being the conventionally existent self. Therefore, even the statement in Sutra, I think this is, the view of I and mine by some ascetics or Brahmins is only a view of these 5 aggregates, refutes by means of the word only that a self with a different nature from the aggregates exists as the observed object of one's innate apprehension of an I. So I think that means that, according to Prasangika, when the Buddha made that statement of the aggregates or the self, what he meant was he's refuting that there's something outside of the aggregates that is the self, which is what some of the other non-Buddhist philosophers, meditators believe. They believe that the self was something separate from the aggregates, a soul, like a soul or Atman, something distinct from the aggregates, because the aggregates are left behind when we die, and this other thing, this soul, permanent, unitary, independent soul, carries on, takes rebirth. So the Buddha refuted that. He said, no, there's no self apart from the aggregates. However, that is refuted, and the aggregates are shown to not be the observed object of the apprehension of an I. So this was what we looked at earlier, looking at what is the observed object when we have the thought I. And the observed object, according to this school, is the merely designated I, the mere I. Remember that? So when we have a sense of I, whether it's a correct one or a false one, what is being observed is the mere I. That's the conventionally existing I, the I that does exist. And then ignorance sort of superimposes inherently existing I on top of that. Kind of this layer of inherent existence onto what doesn't exist inherently, what's merely designated. So according to Prasangika, it's not the aggregates that are the observed object of the apprehension of the I, but rather the merely labeled, merely designated I, the mere I. That's the observed object. And if the aggregates were the observed object, that would contradict the statements in other sutras that the 5 aggregates are not the self. So there's other sutras that say the 5 aggregates are not the self. The reason for this is that out of the 2 dimensions of the view of the transitory collection, I and mine, the observed object and the aspect of the apprehension of an I, 2 dimensions. Okay, so the observed object and the aspect of the apprehension of an I, those are the 2. If the aggregates were the observed object, they would have to be posited as the self. The reason for that, the reason for this is that out of the 2 meaning the observed object and the aspect of the apprehension of an I, if the aggregates were the observed object, they would have to be posited as the self. They would be the conventionally existing self. But according to our system, prasangika, the conventionally existent self is not the aggregates or any part of the aggregates. It's just the mere I. Therefore, the meaning of the sutra statement about a view of the aggregates must be explained as referring to the observation of the self that is imputed to the aggregates. So anyway, this is our school's point of view. This is something we looked at before, that the observed object of the apprehension of an I, from the other schools, the non-prasangika schools, they say it's something within the aggregates. Either all the aggregates or one part of the aggregates, like the mental consciousness. But our system, prasangika, says no. It's none of the aggregates individually or collectively, but it's just the I that's imputed or designated onto the aggregates. That is the observed object of the apprehension of I. That's when we have this apprehension of an I. What it's referring to, the referent, is that merely imputed, merely designated I. So that must be the meaning of this statement from Sutra. That is why you should distinguish between statements that the mere I, referred to as self, conventionally exists, and statements that an inherently established person, also referred to as self, does not exist, even conventionally. This is confusing, yeah, the word is self. In fact, there's this little book, Joe Wilson wrote this little book. he found like 7 different meanings of the term self. How the term self can be used in 7 different ways. I have a copy of that book. I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's kind of analysis of Chandrakirti's sevenfold reasoning, but he starts off talking about that. So when you come across the word self, you have to figure out which kind of self is he talking about? Which meaning is the self here? Yeah, so the term self in this context can refer to the conventionally existent self, the self that does exist, the merely labeled, merely imputed self. But self can also refer to this false self that doesn't exist, the inherently existing self. It doesn't exist even conventionally. Still, you should not say that this system asserts the self of persons to be conventionally existent. Meaning, no, here, when it says self of persons, that's referring to the inherently existing self, the self that we're refuting. So let's read that again. Still, you should not say that this system asserts the self of persons, meaning inherently existing self, does exist conventionally. So our system doesn't agree. The footnote says, in other words, the self is not conventionally existent in that an inherently existing person does not exist, even conventionally, let alone ultimately. However, the mere I, which is a dependent arising, does exist conventionally. So this is one of the tricky things in learning about emptiness is, what does exist conventionally and what doesn't exist, the false, inherently existing self. And they don't always, like in the text, they don't always specifically say what they're talking about, which self they're talking about. You have to figure that out from the context. Ascertaining this well is an excellent means of realizing the uncommon selflessness of persons. So I guess uncommon selflessness of persons refers to our system, the Prasangika system, which has a unusual, unique explanation of selflessness of persons. So it's probably better not to get into the next section. The next section is determining them to not exist inherently. And that has 3 points: determining that the I does not inherently exist, determining that mind does not inherently exist, and showing how persons appear like illusions in dependence on that. So it's going to go into this 4-point analysis. There's like 4 different points that you meditate on to recognize that the I does not inherently exist. So this is the source of that, which is found in other Lamrim texts. You've probably encountered it before, but it's not mentioned in the Lamrim Chenmo. Lamrim Chenmo has other explanations, other reasonings, but this 4.1 is here. But of course it's based on Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and so on. So we'll get to that next week. Any last questions?
Yeah, so we're taught that we reflect on the topic of selflessness also through like the tenet school system, right? Starting from the core selflessness of persons, and then eventually to the actual, the subtlest, which is the emptiness of the inherent existence of the person. And then on that basis, that naturally leads to understanding the emptiness of inherent existence of phenomena based on the Prasangika school, right? So we wouldn't have to, if we went that way with the persons, leading to the subtlest understanding of phenomena, then you don't have to repeat the analysis of phenomena. Like, we wouldn't have to go through the Chittamatra and then the Yogacara, Svatantrika, Madhyamaka, and those views. Do you think? I don't know. Does that make sense? Or would you like do only selflessness of persons first, and then you repeat the analysis from coarse to subtle of selflessness of phenomena? Is that making sense? Just because we're taught to go in steps, right?
For me, that approach is most helpful. I always found it really difficult because my first exposure to Tibetan Buddhism was the Lamrim, and you're just thrown in to the Prasangika view right from the beginning, and you're asked to, sit down and recognize the inherently existing I. What? And and that is like the most subtle object of negation. You're not taught about other more coarse ones. And so I always wondered about that. And anyway, so when I was doing the master's program and we were studying Chandrakirti, I think. Anyway, and I asked my teacher, is it really possible to realize this most subtle level of emptiness if you haven't realized the other ones? And he said, no. There's a procedure. First, you have to start with impermanence, subtle impermanence. You have to have that realization. And then you have to realize the coarse selflessness of persons, which is this absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent one. You can skip the permanent, partless one because you may not have that view in your mind. That's not innate. Yeah. But yeah, you have to go progressively that way. And I said, well, why aren't we taught to meditate that way? I don't know. But I realized too that the Lamrim, the way the Lama Tsongkhapa writes the Lamrim, it's really the intended audience are people who have already studied all those things. They've studied, ornament for clear realization, Chandrakirti. They know all these things. They've studied, Abhidharma Kosha. And so this is more like a practice manual for those who have done that kind of philosophical study and are familiar with all those topics. So for me, that approach makes much more sense. And when I wrote the book that just got published, How to Meditate on the Stages of the Path, I included meditations on subtle impermanence and the emptiness of a permanent unitarian independent self, just in case somebody has that view in their mind. And then, yeah, I did present it progressively, but that's not at all traditional. Not the way it's normally taught in our tradition. But so what you're asking is about phenomena, selflessness of phenomena. But the only other school that talks about a selflessness of phenomena is the Chittamatra. And for them, the selflessness of phenomena is, the absence of external objects. But according to our school, there are external objects. So we don't want to meditate on that. Right? There would be some differences between the Svatantrika and the Prasangika when it comes to selflessness of phenomena, because they don't refute inherent existence. We do. But yeah, I haven't really thought so much about that. The selflessness of phenomena, usually. But then, if you are following Lama Tsongkhapa's instructions, then you would start with the self, the I, and get a realization of that. And once you have that realization, you just think of some phenomena, your aggregates, a car, a pizza, whatever, and you could easily realize how that is also empty of inherent existence.
They in like the Tibetan education system, they debate these various tenets and views, right? So that's a huge chunk of missing education that we have in trying to deal with this, or even trying to understand the tenets and do it on our own.
And they say sometimes in the process of debating, somebody can have a realization, because their mind is really working on these reasons, and sometimes they'll just bing, have a realization, or they'll just go and sit by the side and meditate and get the realization. So debating is apparently a very powerful tool for sharpening the wisdom and gaining realizations.
Venerable or René has a series of 14 meditations on how to identify the object of negation according to each one of the schools. It's super interesting. And it starts with the Vaibhashika, and you finish with the most subtle Prasangika views. So,
well, yeah, there's a book called Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness by one of the Kagyu teachers. I think it's Sotam Gyaltso, which is published a long time ago. And he does like that. He goes through the different schools and talks about how to meditate on each of them. However, he says the highest view is what they call, Shentong, other emptiness. And according to the Prasang, I don't fully understand the argument, but yeah, there's this, I guess it's the Jonangpas as well, the Jonangpas and some Kargyus, they say they have this view of other emptiness, meaning that, and then our system is self-emptiness. Self-emptiness means things are empty of their own inherent nature, whereas the others say things are empty of something other, some other phenomena that they are empty of. That's just my very Mickey Mouse understanding. But anyway, so that book says the highest view is that. And I remember once talking to Khenzo Jama Tekchok about it and saying, don't we have a system like this? I told him about this book, and he was so, kind of scathing. Other emptiness. So, Yeah, but yeah, it seems like in our tradition there isn't such a system of teaching a progressive way of, yeah, approaching emptiness. So, but Venerable Rene, you said he has one.
I was at a teaching with the recent late, what's his name now?
Ganon Tripa?
Yeah, the Ganon Tripa. Treaser, what's his name now? What's his name now? He's passed. Anyway, I was sitting in a teaching with him, and he said point blank, if you do not realize emptiness step by step through the 10 minutes, you will never realize it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he said if you don't do it that way, you will never realize emptiness.
Yeah, but so why it's not? Yeah, that's good. So let's dedicate.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lusang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever.